But before you go to the bar, we have one last session. And we're very keen to do something different. And many of the people in this room are responsible for strategy. So we're delighted to have Chris Patton of Quirk Solutions. Before founding Quirk, Chris was a lieutenant colonel in the Royal Marines. He was in charge of the Helmand province for a while. For those of you who are Americans, that's lieutenant colonel. And we're here in Marylebone. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Chris.
Thanks very much, Al. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very grateful to those of you who've stuck it out and are willing to sit and listen to me as pretty much the last speaker of the day. In just over 18 years of commando service, and then 7 years since in the commercial world, I don't think I've ever seen any plan ever go the way it was fully intended. And that's a reality, but it's a reality that actually we very rarely front up to. And what I'm going to talk about just for a very brief period of time is how we can start to address this and what we can do about it. The first way in which we need to think about this really is becoming comfortable with the fact that things might go wrong. In your industry, I'm sure the book on the left is pretty much required reading. If you haven't read it, it's a fascinating book by Matthew Syed, where he talks about why the aviation industry is so good at what it does because of the black box. Because things that go wrong are not just recorded, but they're seen as being important for everybody to learn from. Whereas in the medical industry, still a very unsafe place to be if you're going to be operated on, there's lots of mistakes made because trends aren't recorded and they aren't analysed and therefore they aren't picked up on. So the first thing you've got to get your head around really is being comfortable with the fact that things are likely to go wrong. If you just stick your head in the sand and hope that things go okay, there are going to be more people in the organisation getting anxious about that and worried about it than they will do if you actually confront it and deal with it out in the open. If you like, I was having a chat with one of the guys from Gamma Aviation during the break, and we were comparing how, in lots of commercial circumstances, the way people go about things is to make a plan and then roll it out and hope that it works, and crisis manage the bits that don't work. That's the equivalent of talking to me in my old life and saying, you can see where you've got to go to, you know where you are now, but the ground between here and there is covered in fog. Somewhere in there are a bunch of mines, but you don't know where they are. Let's just take a wander across and see how we get on. And the problem in your sector, invariably, is that when you step on a mine, it happens to be always right in front of a client. And if you trap on that mine in front of a client, that could cost you a lot of money. If you are one of only 5 providers in a particular sector of your market, that could now be catastrophic. So how do we start to create a space in which we can bring in more challenge and we can critique ourselves and we can critique our thoughts so that we break away from that groupthink and that optimism bias that happens so often? If we all believe it's going to work, it will work okay. There's lots of different ways of doing it. There's lots of different pressure tests you can use. From Gary Klein's pre-mortem theory, imagine we have already failed and let's work out why. The one that I like, the one that the military use an awful lot of, because it works and it's very time efficient and it's very effective, it's very disciplined, is a simple blue team versus red team concept. So you have actually 3 teams involved in this. You have the blue team who are going to champion the plan or the initiative. Okay, so they are saying, this is what's happening, this is how we're going to go about it, here are the steps we're going to go through. You can do it chronologically, if you like. You can do the first 100 days, the first 3 months, or you can present it as a series of issues that you're going to deal with. What you then sit down and do is you try and work out who all the stakeholders are that could be affected by that plan. Internally to your organization, who are going to have to deliver the plan, as well as externally to it. It could be markets or competitors, it could be clients, it could be suppliers, it could be a wide range of people. What you're looking to try and do is to replicate the ecosystem that this plan is going to run into. You're looking for that reality check. You're looking for that sanity check. So by creating the same environment and replicating it by people sitting down, playing stakeholders, you allow yourself the opportunity to run your initiative into that reality and see how it gets on. You get the opportunity to backtrack, to change direction, to try different angles, to try different ideas and see how they're getting on. So you're pushing yourself to the point of failure, but in a safe space. You're allowing yourself to get to the point at which you can now start to predict where your plans might go wrong and build up a contingency plan to deal with it, rather than crisis managing it, which costs a lot more. And it slows down your tempo because everything has to stop. You do want a third team involved in this, which is a facilitation team. And I would always recommend you have at least 2 people in your facilitation team. This helps keep the whole thing on track and really slick. What you're looking for is a really short, punchy presentation from the blue team. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going about it. And a reaction from the red team stakeholders. And you're going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. Really slick. And the facilitators keep that conversation on track. And they keep it focused on the issues that you want to look at. So a very simple tool that can be run really well, and then the facilitators are recording and capturing all of those outcomes. In your type of industry, the one thing we're seeing quite a lot of at the moment is consolidation of operators. So if we take that type of thing as an example that we're worried about, either because it's going to affect our business directly, or we're a supplier to them, or it's potentially part of our own business. If you have a little think about who might be involved from the red team, these are just some of the people that might be in there. Okay, and you can see, hopefully, the wide range of different types of challenge that you're going to get. Everything from trip planning and permits, through to the charter brokers that have just been up on the stage, competitors, financiers, the airports that were mentioned in the previous conversation. Okay, so you're looking for that really wide challenge to come in and help deal with your thinking. Because otherwise it's all too easy for you to simply sit down and say, we haven't really got an awful lot of time to do this, put the plan together and let's just run it. It'll be fine. All right? We haven't got the time to do all this stuff that Chris was talking to us about, this pressure test. But if the plan goes wrong and you step on a mine in front of the client, actually the time spent doing this might have been very worthwhile investing. And it doesn't take long. You can run a very, very effective pressure test done in this blue team, red team concept on some sort of program or bid or proposal in about 2 to 3 hours, max. So in terms of people being away from their desks and away from actually earning money and helping the company, it really helps. It can be used in lots of different ways. We had a quick look there at a case study of something within your sector around mergers or acquisitions. But you can also use it for GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation. You can use it in investment planning. We work with the NHS, the National Health Service. We do a lot of conflict management with them because they all hate each other. All right? So actually, if you've got a bunch of people and every single conversation seems to get full of friction and difficulty and everybody's falling out, having this process as part of your governance really helps because it becomes a discipline that you can do. You can use it to provide performance coaching for some teams in your organization. I've seen people put blue teams together as a new team within the organization, and they're put under the pressure of this war game, of this pressure test, because they come out the other end as a much tighter team. But instead of it being done on barrels and planks and imaginary bottomless chasms with problems they have to solve, It's been done on a problem for their actual business and for their actual industry. Okay? So lots of different ways in which you can be used. All you have to do to change it to one of these different ways and one of these different problems is simply change who's sitting on the red team. The structure of the test remains exactly the same with blue and red, but you change who's taking part, and that changes the focus, it changes the topic, it changes what you're trying to get out of it. It could be a communication strategy that you're looking to deliver, or anything else like that. The point is here that what you're looking to try and achieve is this safe space. You want to try and create a temporary bubble. People are often quite surprised that the military use this type of technique. They think it's really odd that somebody quite senior would allow themselves to be challenged by somebody quite junior. But the military is probably one of the most collaborative and collegiate organizations to work in. And I see, and have seen over the last 7 years, an awful lot of commercial businesses that are far more hierarchical than the military are. And there's this sense that if I stand up as a senior leader and I allow myself to be a little bit vulnerable and I say, I don't know how to do this, that's seen as a weakness. Because I, as the leader, have to be all-seeing and all-knowing to everybody and be impervious to anything. But if I actually stand there and say, I don't know, am I opening Pandora's box? Does this now mean that everybody feels they have a vote to critique me at every given opportunity? And by creating this safe space as part of a workshop that you step into temporarily and then step out of again, you allow people right down through a vertical slice of the organization to be given the opportunity to make a comment, to make an input, but when you step back out of that bubble and you've got all the outputs and all the recorded actions from it, you're back to day-to-day working. So it's a safe place in which you can start to do this sort of test without damaging the way in which the organization is structured and its culture and its hierarchy, if you so wish. That, in essence, is pretty much it. There's lots of other different ways of going about it. I prefer this type of technique, the red and blue technique, because you are trying to predict what might happen in the future, and you're looking at it from a positive lens. The Gary Klein technique that I mentioned earlier on, essentially you say, if our plan was to deliver X by year 2, let's imagine we're now at year 2 and we have absolutely failed. Let's now take it in turns to go round the room, round the table, and work out and give examples and reasons why we may have failed. We'll then capture all of those, work out how to mitigate those risks. It's very efficient because you don't necessarily need the preparation and the time of the red versus blue and the facilitators and everything. But it can unleash hell. So it comes with a bit of a government health warning, okay? Because human behavior means that if I'm sitting in a meeting and somebody says, and I'm the head of operations, and somebody says to me, we've got to year 2 and we've absolutely failed, why is that the case? The tendency from a human behavior perspective is not for me to sit there and say, because I have let the side down, because I have got something wrong, because my team have done something wrong. It's to say, because marketing are rubbish. Marketing then go through the roof, and all of a sudden you've unleashed hell and you've got a big punch-up in the planning room, okay? I also don't necessarily like the way that it presumes failure. It might just be me, but I prefer to look at things from a positive perspective and say, this is going to work, but I know it's not going to work as I absolutely intended it to. So let's bring in everybody that I can right through my organization to help critique my plan. My very last job in the military was to be head of Afghan strategy to Downing Street and to the Cabinet Office and within the MOD, trying to pull together the plan to get over 10,000 troops and 20,000 shipping containers worth of equipment out of a war zone several thousand miles away in Afghanistan. And we use this technique all the time. to check and keep checking and keep checking our thinking to make sure we weren't creating plans in our ivory tower that would then unpeel as soon as they tried to hit reality. And that, pretty much, ladies and gents, is the message I'd like to give to you today and end with. Be comfortable with the fact that your plans probably aren't going to work, and instead of sitting there and hoping they do, just go that little bit of an extra stance, go that little extra mile to put the plan under pressure, put yourselves under some pressure, and as a result, work out where those speed bumps might be and what you might do about it, but thinking about it right now, so when you hit the speed bump, you go straight through it and the momentum is maintained and your bottom line is maintained and your margins are maintained. 9 seconds to go. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Chris or quick comments? This is the classic cocktails standing in the way.
It is, yeah. I don't blame you.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, I think Chris is going to be in the cocktail reception, so you can go up to him there. Thank you very much, Chris.
You're welcome.
That was brilliant.